lightning flows better, but it doesn't mean that it's going to stop you from learning the lightning flows at all. I mean, like, consider this way. So you're learning a new technology. You learned Salesforce as a new platform. You learned everything in Salesforce as a new platform. So how was that experience, and how is that going to be different from learning lightning flows? So when you are decided you're going to learn something new, you don't have any expectations around it, and then you straight away jump into it and start learning. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take the time how much it took for you to learn the Salesforce platform. It's going to take the same amount of time to learn that complete new feature that comes similarly. It similarly coincides with the object-oriented programming on the concept level. But then once you get the grooves of it, once you start practicing it, you will automatically get a hold of the whole concept on the lightning flows, and your understanding will be completely different from developers. I agree that, but then you will. So that there's different way of understanding things, right? So you can understand a particular concept in 10 different ways, but at the end of the day, did you understand or not is what the question is, right? So you can understand in way one, I might be understanding into way two, but end of the day, we both know how to do flow in the lightning flows in Salesforce platform. It all that matters at the end of the day. So it doesn't mean that I don't know coding and that is going to stop me from learning lightning flows. No, it's not going to stop you. It's just that for me, it's going to be pretty faster in terms of that learning curve. It's going to be a little slower in terms of learning curve if you are going to learn as a first hand on the lightning flows.
Got it. So
That would be the difference.
so thank you, Guha. So on that topic, on resources available to get started. Well, Trailhead is great. But I found it to be super basic, right? After I've gotten the basics of Apex and Visual Force, there isn't. I didn't find too many resources that Salesforce provides, but I did find a plural site course by David Liu called When to Code, and David Liu
Right.
covers like instances where you can use the platform instead of code, and then when the platform can no longer be leveraged, then he covers examples of when you can go to code once you have used up all the available declarative functions. I just put that class on the link to that class on the chat window. If you guys want to bookmark it, it's on Pluralsight. Pluralsight is free for the first 30 days. You may want to try this class out for 30 days. It's totally worth it. And it helped me a lot to know what the platform can do, like the extent of the platform before jumping into code. Like, do any of Leandria, have you come across any of these resources that you know off the top of your head that could be useful for a beginner who's getting into development? No, that's all right.
No, not really. I haven't. I'm very early in my journey in terms of understanding Apex code, but I'm particularly interested in the resources that you're sharing now, um, in terms of getting a better handle of flows and the more complex functions that can be performed, with configuration, because that's kind of where like my current interest level and like area of focus is now.
Got it. Got it. So Gua, do you have anything in mind that helps um, beyond the beginner level, right? Because Trailhead is just ABCs, but then after you're done with that, what do you recommend that a, a new admin like Leandria could do to build on that foundation?
Sure. So I was just checking on this David Liu site. So have you visited his website, David Liu's website?
SFDC
What it?
99, is it?
Yes, fdc99.com.
Okay. Oh,
So,
that's good.
so that would be the next starting point if I completed the trial heads. I mean, for as an admin, if you come in, first you need to know, first you need to understand the concepts of Apex, like why we use certain statements in the code and how to get started with the hello world code and all those stuffs, right? So that site is something like starts from very basic, like for someone who's completely new to coding. So that could be a best place to start as an admin and transition into a developer. So I would highly recommend going through that site. So there is a tab called beginner tutorial, and you would find Apex as a category in it. And you can go through, like, there are multiple links posted in it. It starts from beginner level to, goes deep into advanced level. So there are like 13 chapters in it altogether. So I would recommend going through that. And I think that should be a starting point to become like a basic developer. And the main secret of getting yourself expertise in certain development is like keep practicing it. Bring out your own scenarios. The one thing I would usually do for myself is like when I try to see a particular piece of code, usually I go to the GitHub repositories and then try to grab some of the built functionality. So developers like us, they post the whole functionality code on GitHub that they have prototyped. And I usually pick up that code and then I start modifying that code to build something out of that functionality. Like the functionality, the core base of the functionality will stay intact, and then I will try to change some of the parameters and see how that behaves. So if they have like five fields in one of the page layout, and they have created the page layout programmatically, then I would start adding one more field and map it to a particular Salesforce object at the background, and then try to save that form. And if that is success, then I was able to add additional field and save the form, and I was able to put in an additional information into the form. So likewise, I'll try to I'll start with the first step, like a small tiny step, and then start modifying things, and then when I end up sometime later, I would see completely a different application. So it is completely confusing when you start writing from scratch. Sometimes I even go blank. I don't know what to start. What to start with the idea. I wouldn't be having any idea at all. I would be completely blank, and then I would be thinking for hours to see what I can do with Apex code. And then when you have the starting point already, and then you just need to like fiddle around all the code and then see how that behaves, and you might run into many errors during the course of learning, and then that is also a learning course. And
Right.
yeah, don't be afraid to hit any errors. If you hit an error, many of the people think that like, oh, I hit an error, or I did something wrong. No, it's those errors that will teach you a lot. I mean, like if you get everything right at the first step, you're not learning anything.
Exactly. I mean, I found that, GitHub has been a very useful resource even for me in the past. I was looking to do roll-ups on lookup relationships, and when I was doing my research, I saw so many developers had written like triggers and just posted it on GitHub on how to do specific roll-up summary fields on two lookup relationships. And that Apex code was just there for free for you to use. And for those of you who are not sure how to use GitHub and how it works, there's a Trailhead module that I just put on the chat window on Git Basics. So you can follow that Trailhead module, get familiar with how you can use the free code that's out there to in your own projects. And the people on that GitHub repository, they constantly contribute to that code, so you can always look at the latest contribution. You can ask questions on there, like what you can do is you can go into that specific Git project and you can ask a question from the author, and if the author is still contributing to that code, he will respond to that question that you're having with, like if you get stuck with a specific step or specific line of code, you can ask the author, and they are very helpful. Another very helpful resource is Stack Overflow. When you get stuck, you can just copy and paste your code into Stack Overflow, and there are people who reply to that. And when you apply for a developer job, I've had employers ask that question, like, do you have a Stack Overflow account, or do you have a GitHub repository that they can review? So that's a very common interview question when you go to a developer interview. So Guha, have you had any like interview questions that are quite common that you get repeatedly at, like when you left, for example, you said you left Wipro and joined Capital One, and then now you're in Acumen. Like, what were the common questions you got?
So for me, my profile was developer right from the beginning. So yeah, I think that there would be many questions that if you think on admin perspective, it wouldn't make any sense at all. But in terms of Salesforce platform, the most common questions I usually hear is, so the questions were framed, the questions differ, but the whole concept of the answer would be the same. I would get questions around the process builder and workflows, and when to use workflows, when to use process builder, and all those stuffs. And if you need to understand in what order a transaction in Salesforce would happen. Like, you don't have to need to know the coding for it. You just need to read the order of execution for that. So if you just Google around like order of execution in Salesforce, it'll bring you a link that says order of execution on the triggers. So if you go through that link, it will give you a list of step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of items that will be executed in a particular order. So always when you do a particular save on a save button, you might be thinking that the save operation does a save from your page layout, but there are many items that is getting executed in microseconds in just that 1 second transaction. So it will start with your validation rule. It will go through your Apex trigger. In Apex trigger, there are 2 other contexts. Right. Trigger will fire before your transaction. Trigger will fire after your transaction.
Right.
So one transaction means when you click on save and your browser rotates, the browser status symbol rotates, and then you navigate to a next page or you land up on another page. The whole transaction time is what one transaction is.
Got it.
So you might be seeing that it happens in just in a second or two, but within that 1 second or 2 seconds, there might be hundreds of operations happening in the background. So that is something as a developer you would understand in depth, but on a high level as an admin, you also need to know that there are multiple transactions happening at the backend.
Exactly. That's so, I was gonna just bring that up, that even admins should know the order of operations, not just the developers, because if they're going to write a process builder process and a developer already has a Apex code running or trigger running, and you don't know the order of operations, guess what? You're gonna crash the. There's going to be a crash right there. So for me when I was learning that, I used one of the logins that was created by a non-profit organization for me when I was implementing NPSP pro bono. They created a login, and what I learned is most of these non-profits, when they join the Power of Us Hub, they're also given access to the Salesforce University. And the developer, the platform developer 1 class is available through the Salesforce University for free if you're a non-profit. So I logged in with with those NPSP with that NPSP username and password, and went to sales help.salesforce.com and went into the Salesforce University, and I was able to access the Platform Developer 1 class, which is very well done, high quality. The content is new, and the content is easy to understand. They're broken down by a master instructor from Salesforce, and they go through the order of operations, like each one in detail, and how one affects the other. For example, a validation rule can affect a trigger, and so on and so forth. So I highly recommend, even if you're an admin, to take the Platform Developer 1 class on the Salesforce University, because you will be able to speak the same language as the developers when you speak with them on a project. And that Platform Developer 1 class is a good crash course. And it's free. All you got to do is go volunteer with a nonprofit and have them create a login for you, and then go to help.salesforce.com and use that login to access the Platform Developer 1 class.
Right, and I just posted that link in the chat window.
Okay.
So if anyone want to go through that link, you can just have a look. So yeah, this is something which is like a common question in the interviews in terms of platform. No matter your admin, maybe for the basic admins they wouldn't ask these questions, but as a consultant, sometimes they ask this. As a developer, it's a very standard question. So I mean, like if it would not be a direct question that what is the order of execution, they would be asking some scenarios based on this order of execution. So there are multiple scenarios in my personal life. Like when I was working in different other projects, so I would have written a trigger, or I would have written an Apex class, and at some point of time, a consultant would come and say that, hey, the particular transaction on the save operation was not happening. Can you check the code? And when I check the code, it will not be at one place. So sometimes it could be on the trigger, it could be on the validation rule, it could be on the process builder that is failing the whole transaction. So when you on a real life situation, when you look at a particular save operation, always consider that it is not because of your configuration is messing up there. It could be something went wrong in the code, or sometimes it could be went wrong on the validation rule. It could be something going wrong with your process builder. So everything happens in that 1 second. So until you go to the debug log and then try to figure it out, you wouldn't know where exactly the issue is coming from. So just a food for thought, like keep in mind that there are multiple activities happening on a particular transaction. So it doesn't have to be only from the configuration point of view.
So you mentioned the debug log and understanding like the gibberish in the debug log. Like, what are good resources for admins to refer to when they go into the debug log? Like, for example, there are certain digits, and each digit means something in the debug log, right? So is there a trailhead module that explains that, or is there something that an admin can refer to understand the gibberish in the debug log?
That's a good question. So probably just give me a minute. Let me share my screen and I will show you one of the debug log.
Sure, I'll make you.
That's a really great question. I mean, you don't have to really depend on a developer to start debugging things. You can, as an admin, you can also debug yourself.
Okay, I just made you a presenter.
Just give me a minute. Let me log in into the
Oh, welcome, Henry. I just noticed that you had joined. So anyone can ask any question you want. There's no question that's a stupid question. So if if you have any burning questions about transitioning into a developer, and what does the debug, for example, what does the gibberish in the debug log means, you're welcome to ask.
Let me share my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Hey, Gavin. Are you able to see my screen? Hello.
Yes, I'm able to see your screen.
Yeah. So, yeah, others, if you couldn't see my screen, just let us know. So for debugging, so usually when you do a operation on a debug, when you do an operation in the application, like for example, let's assume that you created a application and you're going to one of the record page and you're trying to do a save operation and you hit an error or there is some abrupt error and you want to debug, and obviously you would be usually giving it to a developer to debug that. You would say, I'm getting an error on this page, and can you investigate and find out the root cause for it? So what we usually do is we go to this debug log here in the setup. We set up a debug log for that particular logged in user. Suppose if the admin or the consultant is using, we set up a debug log for that particular user so that any operation done by that user is being captured in the logs here. So until you set up a user for that, until you set up a log for that user, it will not be captured inside Salesforce. There's no way you can trace back to what he or she is doing on that application. So this debug log will give you an opportunity to look at line by line execution of your whole code. Not only the code, it will also expose everything that you do. Like you click on one particular link on anywhere in the application, that will create a log here. So basically, I can see as a developer, I can see what are all the pages you have clicked on and what operation you're doing and what is the sequence of operation you're doing. And that is really helpful when it comes to investigating a bug. So you hit an error or something is failing and you don't know what's happening in the background. As a developer, the person who has built that functionality would be knowing or would be having some idea where to look at, but still he may need some clues to why that is happening. But as a third person, if I come to the application and then I see something is failing and I wouldn't know where to search for it, like there might be multiple process builders, there'd be multiple lightning flows, so I wouldn't know which flow to look at it. So only place I would go as a third party user is go to my setup and go to the debug logs and set up a debug log for, if I'm using it, I'll set up a debug log for myself. If I'm going to investigate for someone else, then I'm going to set up a debug log for that person and ask them to redo that operation to capture the debug. So the first step you would do in the debug log is that you first create the debug log for that user. So for example, I'm going to create a debug log for myself now. So I'm going to choose the entity name. That will be the user. And obviously the entity type is user. And you can also capture for one particular class, like if you're investigating one class or if you're investigating one trigger, then you can set up the debug log for that particular trigger so that the log will capture only that trigger execution. It will not. It will ignore all other executions,
Okay.
or it will capture only the instance when the trigger will be called. So it will capture the whole transaction whenever the trigger is called.
So if you want to capture like a visual flow, do we use the automated process as a
Yeah,
entity
that's
type?
right.
Okay.
That's right. So if I do automated process, I don't have any automated process here, so it's not showing up, or else it will show up the lookup, and then you can choose the automated process. So let's do this user again. One sec. That's my user. So you will set up the start date and end date. Start date, end date usually be 24 hours window, so you cannot set more than 24 hours. And the debug level. So debug level is something crucial you need to do when you start debugging. So let's set up a new debug level so that I can show you what is inside the debug level. So the debug level will tell you what are all the components or what are all the features that you want to record in this debug log. So as I told you, one transaction will have like millions of minor transactions within that. So on click of save, you might be wondering it's saving only the record page, but then it might be triggering a trigger. It might be triggering like 10 other validation rules. It could be triggering different Apex classes behind the scene. It could be triggering a process builder. There could be 10 process builders working on the same transaction. And there could be 10 lightning flows working on the same transaction. So that could be more than 50 or 60 transactions happening in the same one click of save. So what I would do is I'll go to this new debug level. Let's say debug everything. And then, so here you would see all the features that is available in Salesforce, right? So Salesforce offers you a database, which we, in developer terms, we call it as SOQL. So that's why they have given all the developer terms here. But then when you, on a consultant or admin concept, it would be database. So there are 3 levels of settings for that. So how do you want to capture it? First, you will choose the category, the database, and you would say, I want to capture the database transactions to the finest level. So finest in the sense it will capture the minute transactions that is happening inside it. So let's say if I do none, it will not show me any of the debugs, any of the logs that is created for database transaction. Suppose if you're doing a save operation and you want to capture the DML commit to the database, or if you want to capture that the data has been saved, you have to set it to at least the info level so that you would know that that particular piece of data has been saved back to the database. If you completely want to hide it and you don't want to see those type of transactions in your log, then you would set it to none. So this none would be useful whenever you want to debug a particular piece of functionality, and you know for sure that, for example, let's assume a scenario where I know for sure the workflow is failing. So until I created that workflow, everything was working fine. I created a new workflow and then everything is failing now. So which means my workflow is messing up something in the existing code. So what I would do is I will set everything to none, and then I will set the workflow to the final, so that I will have all the transactions that is happening inside a workflow right from your entry level. It will say what are all the entry criteria it went through, what are all the entry criteria it got passed, what are all the conditions it got failed. So your workflow can have multiple or and logics, right? So each logic it will say pass and fail in your transaction, and then it will print out those lines like this is the condition you have laid, and this condition failed, and so it didn't enter this particular use case. I mean, like the workflow will have or an logic to give you like 10 use cases clubbed together in one workflow, right? For example, in process builders. So all those transactions will be printed line by line, and then it will say whether it passed or it failed. And if it failed, what is the reason it failed, and all those stuff. So setting it to finer will give you that information. Setting it to fine will reduce certain information, so that printing of that log, and info will again reduce much more information, and warning will give you only if it is failing. So only it will give you it will print the log only if the flow is failing. If the flow is getting successful, then none of your log will be printed up. And for the error, it is like if there is a fatal error, or if there is any connected flows that is being triggered, then that would be shown up as error on the log. Until other than that scenario, then there will be no other transactions printed on your log. And then, as usual, we will not print any of the logs. So for now, let's set it to finer. I will set it to finer for all the transactions and see how that shows up. The validation rule, it will just show whether the validation rule is executed and whether it passed or not. And callout is basically for the web service callout. So you can still debug this, but then you can, as admin, you would be able to see certain errors.
Right.
It might have different meanings on a developer point of view, but then you can help them getting those errors back to their plate, and then say that, hey, something failed in this one, and this is the error code we got.
Right.
Can you check back on your developer handbook and see what this error means?
Oh, I see. So what in the event that, let's say I'm calling Apex class from my process builder, and I don't know if the error is on the process builder, if it's on the Apex class, is that an example of that Apex code on and
So
then
that is exactly where your debug log will help you.
okay.
So instead of asking your development team, hey, go ahead and investigate this particular functionality, so that's going to take up a little more time for the developers to first execute this transaction and then see again how it fails.
Yeah.
And they will set up the debug log and all these steps. But all these steps need not be done by just the developer, because it's pretty much a configurable item here.
Yeah.
So you can set up all these debug logs, get the debug log out, download it from here, and then open up in a WordPad or something, some other word editor, and then go line by line and see. You would find the error specifically where it is failing, and you can say that, hey, this particular line, and it will also show you, if you set this Apex code to finest, it will also show you the reason why it is failing there. So one good example would be you have set up a transaction in process builder, and you're invoking a Apex class from the process builder, or probably the process builder executes along with your Apex class. When the transaction fails, it might be showing up like restricted pick list value. You're trying to insert a new pick list value onto a restricted pick list value. So that is one kind of error that will pop up on this log. And then the log will read that line, like, okay, this transaction failed on this particular class, on this particular line. And the reason for that particular failure is because the Apex class was trying to include a pick list value that is not in your restricted pick list. So since it is being a restricted pick list, you cannot insert a new value into your restricted pick list.
Got it.
So that's the level of detail it will give you on the debug log. And you don't have to wait for your development team for that. You can just read through your log. I know it's going to be a jargon. It's completely a jargon, gibberish language, but it's all English language. So as long as you can read a particular error, so you don't have to care about what is being executed, what these lines mean. All you need to do is like finding, it's like a treasure map. You just need to find what you want.
Yeah. Oh man, this is very, very helpful, because I've gotten this question before from admins who are using process builder with a little Apex call out, and then they don't know if the error came from the Apex call out or if it came the um, from the process builder itself. So I didn't know how to go back and set up my debug level to find that out. So now this is very helpful. And I'm recording this.
Right.
I will post this on the YouTube channel for you guys to go back and refer back to this particular configuration.
All right. So that's where this debug level comes in. So usually what people do is they just choose one of the debug levels which is already existing. So those are the debug levels which sometimes Salesforce provided by themselves when you create your org, or it could be existing already in your org. Sometimes your developers would have created something already in your system, already in your Salesforce platform, and they would have used it for a while, and then they would have left it there. So people try to choose it from this keyword, say, okay, it says SFDC dev console, so it's something related to developer side. So why don't I just use this and get the debug log and give it to my developer? So in that case, when you give it to, I have seen this scenarios happening in a couple of my projects. Like my admins or the super admins used to give these logs to me from the production that there might be some failure in the production, and they just send me this log. And when I look at the log, there would be no sign of failure at all. And I would say there's nothing failing in the logs, and I couldn't find anything out of the log. So can we start do a screen sharing, and then let's go step by step on the debug log side. And then when I try to see that, then I would see that they are choosing some other log level that is already created, and all these levels would be set to info or none. And that's why the log was not printing, even though there was a failure in the transaction. So always, when a functionality is failing, always get a opinion from your developer team onto what are all the items they want to get the debug logs. And once you set all these levels to finer or finest, and then click on save. Okay, there should not be any space in it. So now your level is saved. So debug everything means I have set it to everything, like finest and finer for all the levels. So which should give me end-to-end transaction of the process. So now I'm going to save it. So now debug log should be debug everything. So this is the active log I should be looking at. So ideally you would be having one log per user, and then this is the log category, the first list view that you see. And here is the logs that will be created when I do any particular transaction. So let's do something that we already have seen in our previous videos. So now when I refresh this, so I did something on my other application, and now I should see a log created for that. So if you see here, there are 3 transactions that has been done through that one particular step. So so when I click on this work history, that is one transaction. And when I pasted the application number and then clicked on next, that is another transaction. And when I clicked on finish, that is another transaction. So that's why you see like 3 logs getting created.
Wow, thanks.
So as I told you, for every click, there is a transaction happening in your backend. And
thanks for breaking it down to that detail. That was very helpful.
Yeah. So if you think what transaction I have to go into, so go through the order you went through. So you'll be having an idea where that failure was happening. So for example, let's make this scenario up. So I'm fine until going here. When I clicked on, let's assume that when I clicked on next, this screen came up blank and there was no value in it. Ideally, there should be some value, but there was no value in it. So which means when I go to the step 2, there was a failure in that. So I want to investigate the step 2 of it. So I would say, let me see if I can sort it out. I don't think I can sort it. So let's go through the order of the time. So 22 and 24 is the second transaction. So what I would do is either I will download it from here, or I can just click on view. You can still see the log, something like this. And if you see here, so if you had seen my previous video, I would have explained all this fields and how we set up all these values and all those stuffs. So if you haven't seen my previous video, Gavin has a video for that, part 2 of Lightning Flows, where I explained that complete feature of this particular build. And before going through this video, you can have a recap of that to understand what I'm going to tell now. So in my previous video, I would have explained many steps in the Lightning Flows, where I would be saying like, hey, this is where I would be looking up what one particular application number, and I will be pulling up a certain record. So all those steps are happening here, if you see here. So the ID value, and it's looping through all those values and finding one record, and it will give you how much of Salesforce limit you have used. So every minute detail has been captured in this log. So here is where you will be searching for error. So if at all there is an error that is happening in here, so you would be seeing an error with the keyword error itself. So if I type error now, I couldn't find anything. It says 0. But then if you have like a fatal error that is happening inside, so you would definitely have this keyword somewhere embedded in here. And if you go to that line should trace back to you, trace you back to the particular piece of functionality that is failing. So this transaction has only the Lightning Flows, but when you have like multiple items into your functionality, like a trigger, Lightning Flows, your process builder, and there could be Apex also. So if all of these items are combined in one transaction and you are trying to debug that one transaction, you would see all the items being narrated here, like step 1, this particular operation has done, step 2, this particular operation has done. So it will go through one by one, and then see, even it is showing up the printing of your results. So when I did that, this particular piece, if you have seen my previous video, I would have explained how I added that BR tag to break it up into new lines. Even to that level, it has been printing out here. So what is happening in that particular line of code? I mean, code in the sense like the machine language, it is code, but for us, it is a configuration. So the BR tag which I added there, even that is also printed here.
Okay. So Guha, I have a question. So when you are in Visual Flow on the canvas, there is a debug button there, right? So how is that debug different from this debug log?
In the Visual Flows?
Yeah, so when you are in your Visual Flow canvas, I have noticed maybe this is a new functionality that.
No, I have seen. I never gave a try for exploring that.
Because when I was digging around, I was that there isn't much help material online about that debug button there. But I'm very interested to know how is that debug different from what you were just showing us in the logs. Like, did you see that? Yeah, that debug button.
I never gave a try. Let's see what is happening. Oh, you know what? This is like a debug mode of your Lightning Flows. So probably I should have some IDs to test that. So so this is the flow, right? So we were trying to check out.
Right.
So here you need to give the application number, which will be in the form of application ID in Salesforce, inside Salesforce. And the output variables would be the counter and the employees, the list of employers.
Right. Right.
So instead of taking a real-time scenario,
Right.
going into that particular application record and then trying to test it out,
Correct.
if you
Correct.
think if that would not be like an ideal situation, if you're in a production, it would not be an ideal situation to test it out directly
Right.
on the record.
Correct.
So Lightning Flows gives you a debug mode where you can manipulate all those values. Like I can put some random count of 2. I can put
Right.
your employers. I don't know how to put this one. I'll do a research on this and I'll get back to you. Let's do another video for this
Definitely.
debug mode.
Definitely.
So basically, on a snapshot level, it is like you give your own parameters
Yeah.
and then click on run and see how the flow runs. Like
Yeah.
it's like dissecting your flow and seeing what is happening inside on the each stage.
Yeah, yeah. I remember doing just some, I mean, having these kind of options back in the day when we were coding in Visual Basic. So it's the same concept of
So you see here.
yeah.
So when I started debugging run it in the debugging mode,
Hmm.
so it asked me certain inputs and then it started creating debug on the sides on the sideline. So if you see, it says this particular flow. This is a flow ID. This is the user ID, and then it says the flow is started by this user. So when let's see if that works. Click on next. So you see here, so each
Wow.
step of the transaction is printed out. It's basically when you have a failure on the flow, you would receive an email
Yeah.
with all these steps. So that steps is being printed back in the debug mode,
Oh,
where
wow.
you don't like watch that failure in your emails. You can
Yes.
directly debug it here.
That's very helpful.
Thanks for bringing that. I'm actually seeing this for the first time. I usually go to the emails and debug it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I noticed that, and I was a little,
Yeah, I have noticed as well. I never gave a thought to like try it out.
good stuff, good stuff. All right.
All right, so
So
this
this
is
this is
cool.
a
Yeah.
very
So
very useful Salesforce
this,
Saturday that we are learning stuff ourselves
yeah, exactly.
by
So,
teaching.
so if you notice, this is the same thing which is happening inside the debug log as well. So
Yeah.
if I move out of debug, yeah, it's here. So if you see here, all these things will be printed in a jargon language, but if you see certain keywords will remain the same. So you dig into your the main keywords like the field API name, and what type of operation it is looping through, if it is a loop, if it is a parse lookup. All these minute details will be printed out here, along with some jargon language. Like these are all not needed for anyone. Like this is for mainly someone who's deep into the product debugging. Product team would understand what this ID means, but
Right.
we as application user or application debugger, we don't need all these things.
Right. Right.
So
Well,
that's all about debugging. So if you in future, if you have to like debug some things, so don't be afraid to try using this debug logs. At least you can at least go into the debug log and then see where the error is happening, and then you can report it to your development team so that it will minimize the whole response time of the bug fix.
thank you, Go. I really appreciate this insight, and also like this question has always come up from the admins on our team and on projects, like on how to go into the debug log and understand what the errors are. So I'm gonna post this recording. Uh, Anyone else who's on the line are welcome to share this with others in the community once I post it online. We are looking for Pardot and Marketing Cloud speakers as well for the folks who are interested in that topic. Please put the word out. If you know anyone who's a Pardot expert and would like to come and speak about how they're implementing it in their organization, or just do a workshop on something as simple as a drip campaign, or journey builder, how to use journey builder for a drip campaign. These, like, that will be a very helpful topic for those of us who are beginning to enter that space, or learn about that space. So again, we are almost out of time, but anyone, I'll leave about 2-3 minutes for questions. But if you don't have anything, thank you so much for joining us. This has been very helpful, Guha. Sounds good. All right, I guess there's no questions. Well, have a wonderful weekend, and we will connect again next Saturday.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys, and we will definitely plan another session on a detailed level of how to get started with admin and go through becoming a developer. I know today it was completely unprepared, and we were just casually scheduling a meeting so that we don't want to waste a Saturday, because we were completely busy until last week, and then we didn't prepare anything for the Saturday. But at the same time, we don't want to go waste. At least we'll have a informal discussion on helping each other on certain topics.
Right.
So next session we will plan out pretty much a deep dive into becoming a developer from an admin.
Great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.